on house arrest, they would say doesn't do much.
Alright, I think it should be recording.
How much they have. Remember I said there wasn't a lot in the indictment?
I'm not really sure what exactly it is recording. Let me look.
Whether to deny bail. Quote, as to witnesses, to date, the government has conducted
Okay, it
interviews
should
with
be
over 50
recording.
victims and witnesses, many of whom saw or
And
experienced the
we're gonna be
defendant's
doing
abuse. Many of
Genshin
these
Impact.
witnesses corroborate one another.
Just so I can
Their
get some
accounts
premium
are
gems and
consistent
so I
with
can
the other
wish.
types of evidence discussed
Just
below.
because it's my
The
resets
government
and I usually
expects
do
that
them.
number to continue to grow, given that the investigation
I
is now
am
public,
watching a YouTube
is
video about the
ongoing.
Diddy stuff and
Also,
everything
the
about
prosecution
everything you just
revealed
need to
in
know.
its
So
filing that the
who's gonna
government
watch?
has seized more
It
than
shouldn't be
100
playing in
cell
the
phones,
background, so I should be
laptops,
good. I
cloud
finally
storage
figured out how to
devices,
do it,
hard drives, thumb drives, cameras, a surveillance system that they
and
say
we can get it going. So
shows this criminal
this is
activity.
test one. If it doesn't
So
work this
based on
way,
that, we can
then we
assume
have a problem.
that the evidence the Southern
But for
District of New
now,
York
we're just
has
gonna do it like
against
that.
Holmes is likely vast. Quote, the evidence also consists of physical evidence, which was seized pursuant to search warrants executed at the defendant's residences in Los Angeles and Miami, as well as on his person and the persons of certain co-conspirators. In addition to the firearms and electronics discussed above, the physical evidence also includes other evidence of freak-offs, including over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and personal lubricant. Pretty disgusting. Now, we've gone over the 14-page indictment filed against Combs in the Southern District of New York, plus letters regarding bail sent to the judge by both the prosecution and the defense. You can check out the sidebar episode that we did there. We kind of did a deep dive. You can check it out on the Long Crime Network YouTube page. But right now, what we want to talk about is something else. So the documents, what they do is they give us a better idea of what Homeland Security agents found inside of Combs' homes in Los Angeles and Miami when they were raided back in March, as well as other evidence that they have collected during
Let the show begin.
The Southern District of New York is well known.
Quietly now. Game's up. Time's over.
I will have order.
The Sentencing Commission in fiscal year 2023, the SDNY had more than 1,000 cases. Of those 84% of the defendants ended up taking a plea, while only 6% chose to take their case to trial. And the court's conviction rate is reported to be 95%. So in other words, if the Southern District of New York prosecutors file charges against you, it's safe to assume they've done their homework and think that they have a really solid case. So the U.S. attorney here was asked,
I don't know if he wins this.
why the
I don't
charges
think he
against
does.
Holmes were brought to New York instead
I
of
don't even know what happens, but
well, I'm biased on the
No, my
New York. I think that we
Let me read you a verse. Huh?
the most impactful, sprawling,
that was
complex,
okay.
difficult, sex trafficking, human trafficking, labor trafficking, you name it.
But
the
1,000
District of New
bottles,
York
bro,
can do it,
like
we're
that's
very proud
so
of that.
crazy.
And so the scope and complexity of this investigation isn't something that we ran from, it's something that we
Solidify.
embrace and will continue
Help
to do
protect
that.
us.
Okay, I want to talk about some of the strong
Busted.
evidence right now against Sean, the rapid.
Things are about to get dicey.
This is order.
Retired FBI agent, CEO of Criminal Investigations, and Robert Nunn, trial attorney in federal case. They got both here. So first, what is your reaction to Combs' arrest and Combs' indictment?
Stabilize.
Quietly now.
Shows at the very opposite of this when the corner third and asked, okay, why didn't they arrest
Here comes the catch.
Oh, I did not need to do that.
And my statement then was they're putting the two together because he's such a public figure and he has
Maybe
so
I
many
did.
resources,
I don't
they
know.
want to make sure they get it right. So when I saw this indictment as well as the detention memo that the prosecutor put over, it looks to me like they really did their homework and they're really making sure that
Witness the power. Torn to oblivion.
That's it.
You know, there were raids in California and Florida. There seemed to be a connection to New York, saying that this criminal organization, this criminal enterprise, was based or had headquarters in the Southern District. What do you make of this case being spearheaded by them, and what do you make of the indictment that we saw?
Yeah, there are no stronger prosecution unit than the Southern District of New York. They have a special unit that is designed to take cases such as these sex trafficking, RICO, organized crime rings. So I think Damien Williams is stating it pretty clearly and correctly that the Southern District of New York would be on anyone's top list of units of government agencies that would be able to handle something like this with a celebrity and the complexities and the number of witnesses because it is such a elite and heavy conviction centered prosecution unit.
Look, the indictment and the bail letter that was put forward by the prosecution, serious accusations. I mean, disturbing to say the least. And even though we don't know all the evidence, and we're going to get into some of it, they seem to be very confident in their case. But it also, reading on how many victims there were, it seems that one of the charges is at least with respect to just one victim. Racketeering cases can be complicated. But saying that, do you feel that this is a strong case based on the allegations?
Yeah, this is one of the strongest sex trafficking cases that I've ever seen. While the indictment was not as detailed as I was expected, and there were some allegations that I suspected might be made that were not, such as, underage victims or, perhaps murder or, things like that. This was focused enough and had enough meat that I feel like it'll be very difficult, to sort of get out of these allegations. It seems like they've interviewed a number of witnesses. I think they said at least 50 victims and witnesses that have already been sort of interviewed and have agreed to cooperate in this, and I'm sure that there are many more, and they're even looking for more. So I think that they feel pretty strongly that they've put together a strong package, and I think they're pretty confident.
Do you agree the way he was arrested? This became a big issue yesterday. He came to New York, was at the Park Hyatt. He and his attorneys knew he was going to be hit with charges. In fact, his attorney said to the media before the indictment was unsealed, we anticipate racketeering and sex trafficking charges. But yet, despite that, they took issue with the way that he was arrested and he was apprehended and taken into custody. I think he wanted to surrender himself. Do you disagree or agree with the way that it was handled?
I'm a little agnostic on that. The bottom line is he's accused of very, very serious crimes. I mean, there was allegedly harm done to people. And if they want to go out and arrest him and do it in that manner, that's their prerogative. And frankly, that's their right. So for them to say, well, he was going to turn himself, he was going to do this, we don't know what he's going to do because right after or near the time of when the first search warrant was done at his place in LA, apparently he got on a plane and flew down to Florida. So he's already shown a propensity to move when there's pressure. So I think the New York authorities thought, well, we got to make sure we get this right. We want to take any chances of flight from this guy, because if they tried to track him down in a foreign country, it would be an absolute nightmare.
By the way, I was talking last night about this, and I was asked, why didn't he just leave the country? Right, he knew the charges were coming. Why didn't he just leave the country? And I said, well, the authorities could have arrested him immediately on the spot if they knew. But would that mean that they were tracking him beforehand? They knew when he was boarding a flight? And he's been moving around, right? He hasn't just stayed in one place during the course of this investigation. What would have prevented him from getting on the plane, having a flight plan for, I don't know, let's say California, let's say Colorado, let's say New York, and just saying, keep going and go to some country that doesn't have extradition? What prevented him from doing that? And what would be the way authorities to track him and stop him from doing that?
Well, to do that, it takes a lot of moving parts, because he's going to have to get pilots that are going to participate in that, conspiracy to flee. The pilots also have to file a flight plan. They also have to pick a country to go to that's going to be friendly to his issues, that's not going to extradite him. And he also, when that plan is filed, then he has to go through a process with Customs and Border Protection in terms of being able to go to the next country. So I'm sure he had considered that, and I'm sure he took the advice of his lawyers and decided not to do that, because if he had fled, then this would have amplified, and then the full force of the United States government would have come down on tracking him down and bringing him back.
Do you think they were tracking him? Like, not necessarily like they had surveillance and watching it all the time. Do you think investigators, do you think federal authorities kind of knew what he was doing?
Well, I think based
Now
on
you shall
the number of people who have come forward in terms of the
Damn.
indictment, I think they had people that were likely reporting on him, reporting on his actions and his movements, as well as the fact that they put so many resources to this. It would be reasonable for them to be
All right,
watching his phones, watching his computer activity, and frankly having more people around him who are informing about his behavior.
I want to go into some of the evidence now and talk about what could be the strongest pieces. And to be clear, it's not entirely evident what the prosecution has, what people said to them, what the physical evidence is, what the digital evidence is. But let's go through it. So the prosecution says that many of the accusations against Combs can be corroborated by witnesses. This is mentioned several times in the prosecution's letter to Judge Robert Karnatsky, where they were arguing against bail. For example, on page 2 of that letter, it says, quote, at least a dozen witnesses will confirm that they personally observed the defendant's violence towards women and or the injuries sustained by women at the defendant's hands. Then on page 11, it says dozens of victims and witnesses have provided detailed, credible, and corroborated information against the defendant. Page 13. Quote, as to witnesses to date, the government has conducted interviews with over 50 victims and witnesses, many of whom saw or experienced the defendant's abuse. The government only expects that number to continue to grow, given that the investigation, which is now public, is ongoing. So, Colin, how does law enforcement even go about this? Finding these people, conducting these interviews? What do you think that's about?
Well, 2 points here. Number one, he corroborated his behavior himself with that video that came out of him assaulting his girlfriend in the hotel, which was somewhat hard to watch as a father of a daughter and somebody who's been in law enforcement. Secondly, you talk to one person, and the most basic question you ask at the beginning, middle, or the end of the interview, is there anybody else? Oh yeah, I have this girlfriend that also suffered this type of behavior from him. And then you go to that person. And then, oh yeah, I got this person. I get this. So it ends up being a string or a network of people, because frankly, these women are most likely associates with each other or know each other, and they may even be close friends, and they've been in a circle that was basically targeted by Sean P. Diddy Combs, as well as the people around him that were assisting him in this behavior.
And we're going to also get to this a little bit when we talk about the digital evidence, but how do authorities corroborate what they're being told? Is it they hear a consistent pattern over speaking to multiple people? If 5 people say the same thing, okay, unless they coordinated this, it looks like it might be true, or it looks like there might be probable cause here. Or is it also looking at their phones, looking at other evidence that was collected during the course of the raids and saying that matches up to their story? I imagine the fact that, you know, I said this before and I'll say it again, the idea that anybody can sue anybody, you're not supposed to file frivolous lawsuits, but it seems on the outset that you have prosecutors who are believing the accounts of these accused. At the very least, it seems Cassandra Ventura, filing criminal charges based on those accounts. So it seems that, you know, authorities are believing what's being told, and they have the corroboration. It's not just the accounts of these people, but other evidence to back it up. Now, again, their stories might be similar, but I guess the question is, how do authorities corroborate what they're being told?
Well, first thing, pattern is corroboration. So if you have 50 people saying the behavior was the same pattern, or he took the same actions, and he's been accused. We don't know until he's seen his day in court what really happened. But that's the first level of corroboration. The second thing is apparently they seized videos from his house in California, and that's going to be extreme corroboration right there, because you know it's going to play out right in front of him. And then the third piece of this is the digital evidence, is the text messages, is the communications that he had with these women, based upon, and every one of them is likely to save those text messages on their phones, and we're able to give screenshots to the authorities. So it appears to me that the evidence is overwhelming. However, we're only going to know if it truly is overwhelming, once he has his day in court.
You know, I think it is interesting how many people were apparently interviewed. And we're not entirely sure if all the people who filed lawsuits against Sean Combs are the main accusers. But it seems to me, at least from Cassandra Ventura's point of view, it seems that prosecutors have built their case based on those allegations. And I said this yesterday, and I say it today. It's one thing for somebody to sue somebody else, right? We have a lower standard. They shouldn't file frivolous lawsuits, but you have to, filing a civil lawsuit is very different than criminal charges. For prosecutors to believe these accounts and seemingly have it, people who are corroborating one another, there's a pattern there, but also maybe corroborated by the physical, the digital evidence. That is very significant, that you have civil lawsuits that may have triggered a criminal prosecution.
I think that's right. I think that the civil complaints that you saw, there were many, definitely got the ball rolling. But I would say that it was the video of Cassie, that violent incident that we saw in that hotel lobby that I guess came out of the blue, that really was what I think put the nail in the coffin. That was actually cited to in the indictment as something that they planned to use as evidence, and actually I believe led to the enhancements that we saw on what they're seeking as far as prison time.
And essentially he could be looking at life in prison if he's convicted across the board. I am curious, is it a clear case for you when you hear the different accounts? Because they're saying there's a lot there. They're saying he operated a criminal organization that engaged in forced labor, kidnapping, arson, violence. They're saying that it was a common purpose to protect Diddy, to satisfy his sexual desires, to make money. There's a lot thrown out there. Is this a tough case to ultimately prosecute? And then you have the sex trafficking charge, you have the transportation of prostitution charge. Is this a tough case to prosecute? Is it a clear case to prosecute?
Yeah, I think it's always a tough case, right? I think that a lot of work and evidence has gone into leading up to now in terms of bringing this indictment, in terms of having that initial hearing and sort of having him arrested and bringing these charges. However, I do think that Diddy has very competent legal counsel. I think that they have seen this probably coming for some time. I think that while this case feels like R. Kelly all over again to me, where you obviously have, sort of a video of an underage person, that was involved and introduced, I think that this has, sort of samples of that. But I assume that the defense is going to say that he did not do this, right? If this wasn't an organized crime syndicate that the prosecutor they're accusing him of, he would be friends having a sex party. Yeah, it's not what you want to necessarily hear about. No one really possibly, likes it, but it is what it is. People like Diddy, people wanted to be around him, and they allowed themselves to be sort of manipulated sometimes into perhaps doing things that sound unsavory when you heard in the news. I think that is the crux of what the defense's sort of argument will be, and I guess the question will be, what do you believe?
Continue on with this. When agents ended up searching Combs' homes back in March, they left with a lot of evidence. There were weapons, both legal and illegal. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams showed photographs of some of them during that news conference.
Here are some of the items that we recovered during the searches. As you can see here, this is a drum magazine, large capacity, and it contains, I believe, 59 rounds. I mentioned as well, we recovered 3 AR-15s. This is a close-up shot of one of the AR-15s, and you can see right here, the serial number has been thoroughly defaced.
Stabilize.
Think you can get away?
Another picture of more ammunition and parts of 2 AR-15s right there.
So the government is making the case that he did not do this on his own. He did not act alone. There were people who were around him. There were people who were helping him. And at the very least, there were witnesses to what was going on. I mean, for a conspiracy and criminal enterprise, racketeering, those kind of charges itself, you need more than just yourself. You need others. Someone needs to be a part of it. And just to go back to the indictment, one of the central allegations are these alleged illegal sexual events. So coming from the indictment, it says, quote, Combs and other members and associates of the Combs enterprise wielded the power and prestige of Combs' role at the Combs business to intimidate, threaten, and lure female victims into Combs' orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs then used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sex acts with male commercial sex workers that Combs referred to as, among other things, freak-offs. Freak-offs were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, pleasured himself during, and often electronically recorded. In arranging these freak-offs, Combs, with the assistance of members and associates of the Combs enterprise, transported and caused to be transported commercial sex workers across state lines and internationally. Freak-offs occurred regularly, sometimes lasted multiple days, and often involved multiple commercial sex workers. During freak-offs, Combs distributed a variety of controlled substances to victims, in part to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes, unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept videos he filmed of victims engaging in sex acts with commercial sex workers. Goes on to say that members and associates of the Combs enterprise, including high-ranking supervisors, security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and other Combs business employees, facilitated the freak-offs. And that has become the question. Could other people be in trouble? Could they be prosecuted too? Now, to be clear, Combs is the only one who's currently charged right now. He's the only one named in that indictment. No one else is actually listed in that indictment. No one else is referenced by name. It is very general. But in the government's detention memo to the court arguing why Combs should be denied bail, and by the way, he's since been denied bail twice, they write, quote, the investigation into his and other co-conspirators' conduct is active and ongoing. And you know what spurned that question for us about whether other people could be in trouble too? Some of the reaction that we have been seeing post-indictment. Sports analyst Stephen A. Smith asking if people in Hollywood are scared.
Are the folks in Hollywood lying back and wait, wondering who's next? If you have workers that you can target and they can be punished, it's presumed they're going to die. And ultimately, they're going to force him to comply. And Diddy is going to dime out a whole lot.
Then we have broadcast personality Charlemagne, who said on The Breakfast Club that others could be in trouble.
You get right here in the sex trafficking for freak-offs. There will be others involved. Have you ever been butt naked anywhere with Diddy, or half butt naked with Diddy, and there was some women around, awesome men around, that he told you were part of the party? You probably want to death.
Rapper Foxy Brown wrote on her Instagram story, S about to really get crazy. So I guess the implication is maybe other people might be a part of this. Now, to be very clear, they're just commenting on the indictment. They aren't accused of being a part of this case in any way. And to couple that, here's what rapper 50 Cent had to say before the indictment back in August in an interview with Us Weekly. He wrote, I'm the only person in hip-hop culture who has produced any hit television. Why wouldn't I be the person to produce it? And I'm not on the tapes. See, some of the people who have been around in the culture who are not saying anything, that's because they've been to the parties. They don't know what part of their experiences are on tape. So it keeps them quiet, and it looks like I'm the only guy, but I've been for years that something's not right. And again, he's not been implicated in Combs' alleged criminal allegations in any way. He's just commenting on it. And when you think of Combs, he has always been known for his extravagant parties, the white parties. We talked about this on a previous sidebar, that in light of these disturbing allegations that were made in the multiple lawsuits that he faced, accusing him of sexual assault and sex trafficking, that this is something that became an issue. In fact, here's what Ashton Kutcher said about Combs' parties on the show Hot Ones.
Okay, I've got a lot I can't tell.
Here we go.
So, can't tell that one either.
Then, this was NBA star LeBron James comment.
Hey, ain't no party like a Diddy party, so.
Yeah, I will have order.
We heard from rapper Uncle Luke, who spoke with the podcast We in Miami.
Is she partying with Diddy a lot? Oh, no, not really. I would go to the party and leave early while Whitney stayed there. I go to the party and leave early. I don't know what goes on after hours, but
He wasn't trying to find
I
out.
wasn't trying to find out.
Now, to be clear, these statements from Kutcher, James, Uncle Luke, they were before this criminal indictment, and some even before these allegations of Combs even surfaced. And we have no indication or evidence that they knew anything that's being alleged or in any way a part of this case whatsoever. I just want to be clear about that. So as Combs currently sits behind bars after being denied bail twice, and as this case
I didn't
investigation
even notice.
continues, I want to talk about this. So for that, I want to bring on Afi Patterson, attorney out of Los Angeles, litigation attorney out of Los Angeles. I like to think of her as our resident hip-hop expert. She knows so much about this. A hip-hop trial expert, I should say. Knows the ins and outs. Has been following a lot of these cases recently. Afi, thank you so much for coming on. It's good to see you. As I said, it's been a minute since we've had a chance to talk. I'm going to ask you the question I've asked every single person I've asked this week. Your reaction to the arrest and indictment of Sean Combs. Is it what you expected?
Come on! Shine down! You're having so
I
much
think
fun!
it's back in November. Yes, absolutely, it's what I expected. I think that he was indicted a long time ago, and the indictment was held. I think they've had this, they've had this for a minute. The question is, that's everybody's asking right now is, are there going to be other people? But what we've seen right now is just one person. When people think of RICO, they think, of course, of a huge enterprise. But all you need with RICO is one person who acts over a 10-year period. It's super easy to get a RICO charge, and super easy, of course, to get an indictment. So it's absolutely what I expected, and I also expect a conviction, a swift one.
But in the indictment, they mention not one or two people. They mention a network. They're mentioning a lot of people who helped be a part of this or facilitated this. So is there a feeling right now? And I guess the question could be, when you hear these statements being made by prosecutors in their filings and the United States Attorney in this press conference, the argument is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is this a siren out to everybody? Listen, he just got indicted. You come to us before we come to you. Do you get that sense?
No, I think that when you put the full weight of the U.S. Attorney's Office behind any statement, it's intimidating. I think that it was more like, you'll be in trouble if you don't respond favorably to us. And we see that in that only one person was charged. Only Puffy was charged in this RICO issue. And I think more than anything, they want people to participate. They want people to willingly provide information. They don't want to have to bring down the full weight of the office and use unnecessary resources. Come forward if you have information. If we know who you are and where you are and we come to talk to you, play nice with us, and nothing will happen. That's what I got from that.
I mean, why do you think there was only one person mentioned in this indictment? Obviously, there could be a superseding indictment. There could be other people who are additionally charged. We've seen that in cases before. Do you think that this is common, to just indict Sean Combs, the alleged head of this organization, and that we might see other people indicted? Or do you think there's something else there, that they already have everybody that they need? They are going to be cooperating witnesses. There's nobody else to charge at this time.
I don't think there's anyone else to charge at this time. I think they wanted Puffy, and they went after him, and they got what they needed. And now all they need is more support to buoy their position. I think that if anything, with the more people that come forward, there could be more charges. I'll tell you, when I read the indictment, I thought that there would be more financial crimes, more drug crimes. I was a little shocked that it was mainly surrounding the facts that we saw in Ventura's complaint back in November. So if anything, I think more charges are possible.
Well, I guess the question is, you can know Sean Combs and not be indicted. There has to be more to be criminally charged. You don't believe that they've spoken to the people who have been working with Combs and saying, listen, I can prosecute you if you are facilitating these freak-offs and you are drugging people, or you're bringing people across lines for commercial sex, and you're engaging in this. I could easily charge you with racketeering, but I'm going to work out a deal with you where I won't prosecute you. You just have to testify against Combs. You don't think that's happened behind the scenes already? Absolutely, that's happened. Because you said before, I don't think there's any deals to be made. I don't think anybody else is to be charged. There are people who could be charged.
Oh, no, I don't think anybody else is going to be charged.
But you say that there are people who could be that the government knows.
Absolutely.
All right. Well.
Okay.
Okay. Absolutely. And I think that they'll be testifying, and if he does not take a plea, if they don't offer him anything,
Guess we'll take you guys
there's going to be so
do
much
that.
that comes out that just shocks everybody.
So, Afi, let's say you have a client, and they say to you, listen, my gosh, look, I went to 12 of Diddy's parties. How do I know I'm in trouble? What makes someone in trouble if they're at these parties? Is it that they attended them? Is it that they witnessed it, they didn't do anything? Is it that they partook in it? What would make somebody in legal trouble from a criminal standpoint?
Well, if we look at the indictment and, look at the charges, and it's all about facilitation. So I wouldn't necessarily be concerned if you were an attendee. I don't think you're a target if you're an attendee. I don't think that supports their prosecution of Puffy, Sean Combs. I think I would say it's nothing I would worry about, and I wouldn't go ahead and volunteer any information. Nobody's looking for you if you're just a participant at a party. Be quiet, sit down, relax your nerves, and I just probably counsel them on that. But I think that if you were any type of employee, if you were there, if you were, a driver, a bodyguard, a chef, if you were a trainer, any of the service workers who were around, anybody, a publicist, anybody who worked on behalf of the Combs empire, they should be concerned. But attendees, I wouldn't say it's a big deal.
Because it's aiding and abetting, right? Essentially.
If you're facilitating, if you're working with the Combs enterprise, I think that's what the prosecution would be looking at. You are facilitating these criminal activities. Let's say you engaged in one of these freak-offs. Do you think you could be prosecuted for it? I don't think so. I think, freak-offs, prostitution, it's such an interesting line, when we're talking about morality versus illegality. Participating in a freak-off, to what extent did you participate in it? What role did you play? Was it willingly? Did you willingly play a role? Were you forced? What did you do? Now, if you were my client and you participated, I have a ton more questions. But if you are just an attendee at a party consuming, any type of illicit drugs or alcohol, or participating in any sexual activity, I don't think that that's a big deal in this case.
Let me ask you this. People have been quite vocal since the allegations surfaced against Combs. People have been quite vocal after the indictment, but it's also been interesting to see the people who have been silent and who haven't said anything. And these are people who used to, associate themselves with Combs. Is that because, from a PR point of view, they don't want to say anything about him? Or if I had a list of the over 50 witnesses and alleged victims of Combs that the government says that they've already interviewed, and I look at that list, there's a lot of people I recognize. What do you think?
I mean, that's such an interesting question. They've been silent. Silent how? Like, what do you want from a person? Do you want them to make a press release about their support of him or their innocence? It's like, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, a hit dog holler.